The Republicans are terrified that they have caught the car, as it were, when it comes to abortion. And this has been ramping up, obviously. 2020, we saw, or 2022, we saw the implications of this post the Dobbs ruling. And I think we're going to see a lot more this time around because Donald Trump represents, obviously, it was he who had vowed to get Roe v. Wade repealed, and he was successful. And so all of the right-wingers who believe fervently that women should not have the ability to control their reproductive rights are in full-scale bailout mode. Here is Ben Shapiro reacting to the fact that there will be, or there's an attempt, and I think they need, there will be on the Florida ballot, I should say, the protection of abortion rights in Florida. Now, it needs 60% to pass, but that's only going to sort of like drive out more votes against, against Trump and Florida. I don't know if there's any, is there a Senate race there? Not this time around. Rubio is up. I mean, it's,
Sorry,
Rick Scott, rather. And it could, Rick Scott is not particularly well liked, but here is Ben Shapiro.
Ruled the meaning of the abortion ballot measure was sufficiently clear. The measure allows healthcare providers to determine whether a fetus is considered viable. That's like 23 weeks of pregnancy. Getting a measure on the ballot in Florida was an expensive gamble fraught with hurdles for abortion rights groups. But, of course, Democrats are hoping that this is somehow going to restore their status in the state. It will be fascinating to see. It'll be a really interesting political example of how much abortion can damage Republicans if Democrats are able to not only win that referendum, but also then win additional seats in the legislature or do better than expected in the next gubernatorial race on the basis of policies like that. It'll be good evidence for one position or the other when it comes to abortion in red states like Florida. Whether, in fact, pro-lifers should be taking a more gradualist and incrementalist approach to protecting life in order to ensure the future viability of such legislation. Meaning, you can push it from 15 to 12, and then 2 years from now you push it from 12 to 10, and then 2 years from then you push it from 10 to 8. Is that going to be better than simply pushing from 15 to 6 immediately? Obviously, you understand the moral imperative of pushing it, the ban, as early as humanly possible. Every life saved is a life saved. At the same time, if the legislation ends up backfiring and leading to a full-scale legalization of abortion in the state of Florida, for example, many more unborn kids will die because of that than would have been the case if you took a more gradualist approach. So it'll be fascinating to see, again, what the politics are in a deep red state like Florida. If history is any indicator, the abortion issue has not gone Republicans' way in Michigan. It has not gone Republicans' way in Kansas. So this will be a fascinating test case. Okay, meanway.
All right, so I mean, that's just him endorsing Trump's strategy, but it's just more lying.
Well, it is what I think is it's absolutely doing that, but he's basically giving away the game plan, and that we can sort of boiling frog this essentially. And he says it's fascinating. He is indicating, there's two things that he's indicating. One is that the better strategy would be to pretend like we're not going to ban it like Trump is. Exactly. He's advocating for Trump's strategy. Lie. And then we know this is a long-term plan. We've got to do this gradually and incrementally to make it more durable. That's the argument that he's making. What he's also saying implicitly is they know that this is not the will of the people. They know that. But because they have God on their side, they believe, it doesn't matter. I mean, this is the way they justify, and we're going to have, I mentioned earlier, we're going to have Ari Berman on, who's written a book about minoritarian rule. This is the way they will justify it. Every step that they will take, dispossession of the rights of people to control their, the question as to whether or not they're going to carry a child, whether they're going to give birth. But that's just the beginning. The idea that saying that, oh, people don't want to revert to rolling back marriage equality, or the idea that even we don't want to get back to, I know. Do I think they could ever roll back the rights of women to vote?
Yeah.
Probably not.
I mean,
but that doesn't mean that that's not a North Star for them. I mean, all of this ultimately is a reflection of the belief that God set up the world to be one way. There is one truth, and that truth involves women being subservient to men. And that means that they do not have control over whether they give birth. They do not have control over a whole host of things because that's not their role in society. And also that they shouldn't have control over whether they use birth control.
well, you know how they're giving away the game in that instance is mifepristone, their attack on the abortion pill. That's used from around 7 to 10 weeks gestation, is what I was just looking up here. It's used, and it was extended to 10 weeks gestation in 2016. So that is below the compromise position that they're supposedly striking in the Republican Party, which is like the 16, 15 week threshold. So if you're going after the abortion pill, when 10 weeks is the FDA limit, then that means that your ambitions are much higher than what you're describing. And then when you're going after that kind of pill, why not get rid of the pills that stop an unwanted pregnancy after, say, a condom breaks or something?
Right. Plan B.
Plan B. The ones that women have control over.
And they'll articulate this.
Yeah.
They're not necessarily legislation that's been introduced, but it will be. I guarantee you it will be. It may be in a year, maybe in 6 months, maybe in 3 years, but it will be. There, you will start to see it. This is the way this all creeps up.
That's what Shapiro's saying. He wants just you got to be a little bit more. You got to be a little bit smarter about taking people's rights away when it comes to their reproductive health. And I just. My final point on this is just the false conversation is so annoying about abortion, which is like they want to let you have unlimited abortion up to 9 months or whatever, or even when the baby's born, you execute it. Like 90% of abortions, over 90% of abortions happen in the first trimester. It's like something like 99% that happen in the first 20 weeks. That sliver, that tiny sliver, the reason why you can't legislate this is because it's doctor subjectivity, and it has to do with women or people who can get pregnant having adverse health effects, or the fetus maybe being in jeopardy or not being viable in that time period. Doctors are not giving abortions in the 8th month of pregnancy. That's a fantasy. That's not what's happening. And if they are, it's because the mother could die or the fetus is dying or non-viable. So that's why you can't legislate it. It's not because Democrats want to be able to do this to a baby that would be viable outside of the womb, or a fetus that would be. It's because it's actually deeply harmful to healthcare when you try to put, a limit on it legislatively.
Yeah, I just tried to send a graph, but I don't think the numbers came out. Maybe it's just Ben Shapiro who has this wild idea that the Republicans should slowly roll back the roll into a ban of abortion, because politically it's a non-starter, because normal people realize these people are freaks. And they are this is really more about control and authoritarianism and patriarchy than it is about anything else. Maybe it's just Ben Shapiro who has this idea that Donald Trump lying about his intentions, and really Donald Trump is just going to do what the Republican Party wants, and this is what the Republican Party wants. They want an outright ban of abortion. Maybe he's the only one who thinks that, or maybe not.
Now, to be clear, this was not some liberal ruling designed to put us in a trap. The Arizona Supreme Court is 100% Republican. And frankly, this ruling was likely the correct one. But it still puts us in a very tough spot. So what I sent out yesterday is very clear.
Pause it for 1 second. I just want to say that the Arizona ruling, I think, from a legal perspective, is probably correct. Even though the law came from 1864, it was re-ratified in 1912 when Arizona actually became a state. And then in 2021, the Arizona Republican legislature got rid of the provision that women go to jail if they have an abortion, and that only the doctors will go to jail when abortion is essentially outlawed in Arizona. So from a legal perspective, them upholding this case in the wake of Dobbs, I don't think is that dubious. Now, maybe I'll read some other things that might change my mind, but so I want to agree with Charlie Kirk here, but that's not the point.
Supreme Court is 100% Republican. And frankly, this ruling was likely the correct one. But it still puts us in a very tough spot. So what I sent out yesterday is very clear, which is this, which is sometimes you don't get to choose when you fight the big battles. Getting rid of abortion is an irrefutable and necessary moral good for society in Arizona. However, like all major moral fights in America, they come with a potential political cost. It is likely that the majority of Arizonans won't like this decision. The majority of people in Arizona want abortion, and they want it now. Now, incredibly, Donald Trump preempted this ruling by 1 day. The best path is likely for the Arizona legislature to throw this back to the voters on the ballot in November. Let me say that again. That is the solution. The solution is that the House and the Senate in Arizona can put an alternative ballot referendum, one that is supported by a vast majority of Americans, one that is popular in the state of Florida, one that Ron DeSantis got done in the state of Florida, which is a heartbeat bill. A heartbeat bill is far more popular than a total ban. Now, Trump has pledged to respect the will of the states and their voters. And we can credibly message on this and decouple the top of the ticket, Trump versus Biden versus RFK, from down ballot issues. A tall task, but infinitely more plausible given Trump's announcement. Now, let me editorialize for a second here. I have received some pretty angry text messages in the last couple days because people say, Charlie, you're insufficiently pro-life. They say that, you know, you're not fighting for the unborn. I mean, this is silly rubbish, to be firstly. Secondly, if you don't have political power, then you're not going to be able to advance any of the issues that we care deeply about. Here's the other problem. And this is the sad reality. The Republican Party and many of our voters are not as pro-life as they say they are. And that's just the reality of it. And yesterday was the test. Yesterday was the stress test. Arizona comes forward at the Supreme Court and says, you know, no abortions, which was always the stated goal. And instead of saying, celebrating, people immediately come out and say we're against the ruling. Unfortunately,
pause it for a second. What is going on with him? Is he delivering this in such a way? Is he afraid of hurting like the feelings of his followers? Is that it? Like, I've got some bad news for you. Normal people think we're insane. And how can I say this really delicately? Normal people think that what we're doing is completely retrograde.
Yeah, it seems like it's a little bit of like maneuvering around landmines for the audience, not like the normal people that...
There's something weird in the way that
he's like nervous to make
We've been maintaining a bubble, and how do we make sure that it doesn't pop so unpleasantly?
I know I've been telling you that the American public wants to do this for a long time. And even the fetal heartbeat bill is also a way of obscuring what is going on. It is not a heartbeat. It is an electrical impulse that is converted into sound. Like if you put your ear to my chest, you will actually hear a heartbeat. That's not the case with that ultrasound that they use. Nevertheless, it's also not when people believe that you should ban abortions. And of course, that's just a step in a way to an abortion. But now he's got to like tiptoe around. How am I going to tell all of my followers they're deluded and I've been part of deluding you? But also say, hey,
we've got to be strategic.
We're still together.
Yeah. Okay.
Celebrating, people immediately come out and say we're against the ruling. Unfortunately, there are millions and millions of people that go to church and they're Christians who secretly or not so secretly will say they want an abortion as an option in case if their daughter gets pregnant. Now look, over time, we can start to win more people over. Over time, we could build consensus. In some way, it's...
Pause it. How much time? It's been 50 years. It's been 50 years. And the only project that has worked has been to, in an unprecedented fashion, hold open a Supreme Court, then get a right-wing stooge who will do exactly what the Heritage Foundation says, put all three people on there, and then impose or essentially pull this right away from the American public. You're not convincing more people. Charlie Kirk knows we're not going to convince more people. They know that if you look at, and Charlie Kirk supposedly he works with young people. In fact, he was.
Yes, I'm looking up these numbers now on young people. It looks like young people really support abortion rights more than the older generation.
And still, even with the older generation still here, you still have like something like 70%, 65% of the public supporting abortion. I'm talking like Republicans too.
Oh, yeah.
So Charlie Kirk knows that in the future, you're not going to be able to, there's no winning people over. It is like, how do we get there and still maintain Republican dominance? How do we balance this? And folks, sorry, but it turns out people think that we're freaks. Go ahead.
If their daughter gets pregnant. Now look, over time, we can start to win more people over. Over time, we could build consensus. In some way, it's a proper ruling at an improper time. You need to make sure your laws fit with the will of the people. If the laws don't fit with the will of the people, you're going to get major political backlash.
Yeah, I'm looking up these Gallup figures here because this is the age cohort that Charlie supposedly is trying to win over here. When you look at pro-choice versus pro-life, 64% of 18 to 29-year-olds identify as pro-choice versus pro-life being 29%. And then you go down to 30 to 49-year-olds, it's 56% to 41%, 55% to 40% in 50 to 64-year-olds, and then it's very close when you're 65 and older, 69% to 46%. But even in that instance, the pro-life position is the more popular position. Even when you go from...
Keep that graph up for a second.
I can send you this...
well, no, but link. I think this is what's fascinating about this for me is like I wouldn't have guessed that it was this close over, through the ages. In fact, like for 2009, I'm not sure why. Maybe that's just sort of an outlier. It actually was inverted for the first time.
Crazy.
Yeah.
And in 2017, it just goes to show the way that like demagoguing this. It was never, except for a couple of brief moments, popular to ban abortion with this age cohort. But it just goes to show you, like, people can forget, and people,
right.
It certainly does focus the mind when you lose a right.
Yeah, look at that. Let's see the other age cohorts too. Just because, like, it's abundantly clear how Same thing here. Around the same time, you see, I guess that's 2020, right? And beyond. When that's Dobbs.
Yep.
And then that's from 30 to 49-year-olds. This is 50 to 64-year-olds, but, well, they say they're pro-life.
They're going pro-life.
Okay, sorry. I actually had that inverted. But interesting, but not particularly surprising.
Old people having bad political opinions, that's
Yeah.
crazy.
65.
So yeah, I'm sorry.
plus.
Scratch what I said earlier. I had misread those lines, but that one's closer, I guess. And that's the age cohort where they were alive during Roe,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
Or more
Pre-Roe.
conscious pre-Roe. So
It's
still-
just interesting that even these people who would otherwise, Charlie Kirk is saying, like, we have to sacrifice our principle and our core fundamental beliefs that this is murder for political expediency, because they know this is part of a minoritarian rule project. And they're terrified of it. But on some level, voters have to make them terrified of it.
It'd be nice if the Democratic Party could be using this headwinds to full advantage to push for like a good agenda and not having it mitigate some of their other liabilities.